how important do you think it is to talk about digital detox in the context of stress management?
Very important. It's also something that I teach people is like, just use the settings on your phone. We blame these devices for a lot of things, but if you use the settings that, for instance, Apple have introduced years ago, you can actually have a pretty relaxed relationship to your phone. Like my phone will automatically, remove all notifications between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m., right? So after 7 p.m., only my wife's notifications will get through to me. Anybody else, nothing. And then that, when I change that, it significantly lowers your stress level. Immediately, it feels like you're anxious because, oh, nobody's writing me. I don't get any notifications. But I'm like, I don't care. Unless they're my best friends, I can answer them tomorrow or the day after. Like this society we've created where we have to respond immediately to everything. I hate it. It's not very good for our nervous system.
Welcome back to the Charlene Giselle Show. I am really excited to have a very special guest with us today, a guest that I met all the way in Finland a few years back at the Biohacker Summit. Martin, welcome to the Charlene Giselle Show.
Thank you, Charlene. Pleasure to see you again.
Yes, pleasure to see you too. Last time we were in person, it was a lot colder around us.
It was indeed, yes. It must have been Helsinki. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Second time in Helsinki. That's right.
Yes, it was. The very first time was now over 4 years ago. Time just flies.
Yeah.
What I would love for us to start with, Martin, is for you to give us a little tour of your incredible professional background and your passion and your connection to biohacking as well, since that's how we met.
All right. Well, I guess the best way to describe me today, as I am today, is I'm a health maker. At least that's what I'm trying to call myself these days. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a co-founder. I'm a co-CEO. I'm a lot of things in today's life, but it's all surrounded around health and more specifically proactive health. In my background, as you mentioned, I spent a full career, pretty much 21 years in a big four company, a big management consulting firm, where I was, for 21 years doing a lot of interesting things. I think I had 7 or 8 different roles. Ended up being a director in the global organization for the last 7 years, where I was doing a lot of innovation and design and stuff like that. But really, my background there is what led me to be where I am today. As many people in this health industry, I've come to realize is, you're kind of building your story, and through the years that there's something else you need to do in life than just keep collecting your paycheck and doing fun things at work, right? I had an amazing job, I really did, and I loved my workplace and everything around it. But I also had a burnout. I wouldn't say a severe burnout compared to what I'm working with today in my professional capacity. But I was physically not well at the age of 30. And from the age of 30 to 32, and I should say I'm 43 today, chronologically anyway. But back then I was, I had a rash all over my head. I was super tired. I was always jet lagged. I was traveling a lot back then. And I thought I was healthy, and I was just not well. And like many others in this, I've come to realize I had a heartburn, I had an ulcer. I was like, classic signs of stress. But back then, 10 years, 12 years ago, nobody knew what that meant. It was just like pop some pills, you go see the doctor. And I took ulcer medication for a couple of years, and it didn't really help. It just got worse and worse and worse. And I did all the wrong things in terms of chronic fatigue, in terms of trying to work out more, because that must have been what I needed to do, right? And trying to just hammer down more Red Bull so I can get more caffeine in my blood, and just like all the wrong things. But that was the standard, right? And anyway, I kind of realized by coincidence that there was this world called biohacking, and this was back in the early days of Dave Asprey's podcast. It must have been his episode number 3 or something. I was super lucky to stumble across that. And it just dawned on me that there was this whole world called biohacking that he kind of started. And to a degree anyway, it dated back 2000 to 2006 at the time. with Rob Wolf and the whole quantified self movement. And I dived into that, and here we are. And now, operating a thriving community of about 3,500 online members in the Danish biohack community, and started a company together with some awesome people 3 years ago, where we're proactively pursuing proactive health through all sorts of means, predominantly through easy access to lab testing, easy access to any sort of biometric data that we can help people with, in terms of understanding how they feel, because a lot of people don't know how they feel. And that's, I think, part of our conversation today relating to stress, is teaching people what it actually means, right?
Yes, and perhaps that's a great place to start. I know you shared a little bit about your journey. Can you tell us a little bit more about back then? Were you aware of your stress levels, and did you have any stress management strategy other than just overworking and overtraining?
Zero. No,
Zero.
I was. It was so funny because I met my wife 5 years before this, and she was very calm, and did yoga, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. She's so calm, and I was the opposite, and I was always on. I always needed to do something, and I didn't really. I mean, I heard about stress at the time, but for me, it was a sign of weakness. It was the classic, and it still is today in the world where you and I come from, right? It's, at least we start to talk more about it, but it's still a taboo, belated point. And for me, I had all the symptoms physically, but mentally I was rather strong, and I kind of coped in my own way. But I remember specifically calling my wife from a hotel in Hong Kong, and I was hungover, which happens in that industry that I was in, and I came back from the gym, and I'd just been running 10K with hangovers, with jet lag, with Red Bull in my blood in the morning, and it was just a crazy thing. And I didn't register that my body was not well. I just had all the symptoms, like my head was burning, I was all red in my face, and I had heartburn, and I popped pills to kill the heartburn, and it was just like I was artificially keeping myself alive that way. And it was so bizarre, because it was only when I started to change things I realized what normal felt like. That was only when I started to fix my diet and stress less, do different types of workouts than just running 10K on a treadmill every day, So it was interesting times.
Mm. And now, what do you observe most? I know you work with business executives in terms of their stress management. Do you see any parallel between where you used to be and the type of clients you see now?
Well, I think we've worked with them all. We've had hundreds of clients in the last couple of years through this program of ours. And we see them all. I think there is, luckily here in Denmark, that there's this, there's a movement towards more physical awareness and mental well-being, and that helps. So people who are already oriented towards that come to us because they want to learn more, right? But we definitely also been working with people who are totally like me, who are like, the concept of stress is like, we don't accept it. We even have clients who says, "Oh, can we not call it the stress test? Can we not just call it like a load test? Because I'm not stressed. I'm just overloaded." And I'm like, "Okay, fine. We'll call it overloaded. That's fine. If you if you don't want to go there, let's take it slow, right?" But yeah, no, we have them all. We have those who acknowledge and those who don't. Yeah.
Do you think there is also something to be said about almost stress becoming a status symbol along with business? So I'm stressed because I'm busy because I'm successful, therefore everything's good with this picture. So it's almost something to be proud of.
Yeah.
And then that's the way it is. I'm a busy, successful professional.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that there's a very important distinction between being busy and being stressed.
Yeah.
And let's also agree that stress is a good thing. Like, it's what makes us evolve as human beings. It's like the whole concept of hormesis is the core essence of stress, right? We need it. We need stress to grow. And the problem is only really when it gets beyond the acute stress that may or may not excite us, right, into the more chronic stress levels, where the total burden of stressors on your system is adding up to a point where you're constantly overticking, like your meter is constantly on red, right? Constantly. So
Mm-hmm. And that can impact overall well-being, performance, but also relationships at home, right?
well, that's the thing. That's the thing about where you asked before, like being, is it a thing that we always tell ourselves, oh, it's a good thing to be stressed, or it's a sign of success that we are busy and so on. And I think those who are really truly successful, those are the ones who are either really good at coping, and we can get into coping strategies and what that actually does to our biology, but like those who are good at coping and those who are also got a strong base at home, those who are lucky to have a spouse, or to have kids that aren't troubled in any way, or to just where things are just floating. It's not to say that they don't have problems in their life, but they're just coping with them in different ways than most. That to me is usually what I see and defined by successful leaders that I come across. It's like when they have this ability to cope. But usually behind the scenes, when you dig into it, they've had some kind of experience throughout their life that made them change something, that made them prioritize differently, so that they do know it's important to have family time. They do know it's important to take time off. They do know that vacation is needed and so on. But again, that's unfortunately not the norm yet. It's becoming the norm, but it's not.
Mm. And do you find that there is often a tipping point? So does it take an event, a diagnosis, hitting the wall, a crisis, a divorce for that moment of revelation, or that moment where they decide that they are going to apply a new strategy?
Well, yes. The short answer is yes. I think you're absolutely right. And it's actually what it keeps me up at night sometimes, is how can we artificially engineer somebody meeting the wall? Like, how can we get people to the realization that has the same impact on them as if they, ran into the wall and realized themselves, right? And it's very, very hard. And a lot of people will probably not, realize that they're stressed or that they need to change something in their life until it's at that point. But what we've been trying to do, and what really has made me, like, way before we started the company, even I did a whole bunch of testing on myself, because I was traveling in the US and it was easy to get access to all sorts of blood panels and saliva panels and so on. So I started testing all my hormones, and I realized how wonky my cortisol was throughout the day. And then I was like, Jesus, like, how can I control my cortisol levels? What, that was a totally new concept to me. And to begin with, I didn't even know what cortisol was, right? And so understanding stress and using tests to actually see where you're at. And then we've learned so much the last 3 years, just by looking at these stress panels and working with the individuals and understanding how their life is, what's their daily routine, and how does that correlate to their rhythm of cortisol and DHEA and so on. So back to, do you need to run into the wall? I think yes. Unfortunately, that's the standard that is unfortunately what's happening. But I'm pretty sure that some people are benefiting a lot from getting data on what your body actually is telling you. We've done some really interesting studies on, like, across all of the people that we've tested with our stress panel, and it's 43% of those who, in a questionnaire, like we use Cohen's perceived stress score, which is a clinically validated stress measurement. That's the typical stress questionnaire you'll be faced with if you go to the doctor and say, I'm stressed, right? It's 10 questions, very simple. But 43% of those who end up in the low to low moderate stress category, subjectively, like what they mentally feel about stress, are stressed in their body beyond belief. Like, they are in the red zone of physical stress. Like, cortisol is wonky, DHEA is wonky. And that's really, really an interesting concept, because it tells you there's this mismatch, right? It tells you that there's so many people wandering around thinking, oh, I'm not stressed, neglecting it, but their body is screaming.
Martin, I was wondering if you could walk us through the physiology of stress. So what really goes on in our body? What are the markers? How do we track it? And also, how do we hack it?
Yeah, good question. Well, so stress is really, when you get to understand it, it's really simple, right? Because it's a response system that's innate in our body. Obviously, we are wired to react. Our nervous system is wired to react to threats. but it's also wired to react to non-threatening situations. It's kind of always listening. So all of our sensory system is all connected into the nervous system. And basically what happens is, we can get into the HPA axis, but that may be a little bit too deep. But like going from the hippocampus to the pituitary gland to the adrenal glands, like that's the signal path to create. At the end of that path is creation of cortisol, right? So cortisol will rise. It's our primary stress hormone, and that will make us really alert. And cortisol can be raised in many ways, like coffee, for instance, can raise cortisol levels, right? That's not a problem. It's quite normal. It's quite natural that we have that. But what the body does afterwards is what's more important. It's like, how do we then get cortisol levels down again? And there are many ways you can do that. But the body is naturally also producing a hormone called DHEA, which is antagonistic to cortisol. So it's produced, simplistically terms, it's produced to kind of calm down the effects of cortisol a little bit. It's to dissolve cortisol somehow. And if you measure both, you'll see some interesting, patterns there. For instance, if you have really high DHEA, it's a sign of, more prolonged stress signals. Like you've been engaged for a long time, you have a lot of cortisol in your system. The important thing to understand with DHEA is also that it goes down with age, right? So your ability to produce it gets, downgraded as you age. So there are ways to increase DHEA to help you cope with that, right? And then that's a whole other story. But to answer your question about what does it do to our body? Well, I when I talk about stress, with our clients and do talks around it, we always go into blood sugar as well, because blood sugar, I know you talk a lot about general health and well-being as well, right? But, blood sugar will rise as cortisol rises because you need energy. Because let's get into the minds of our ancestors where, we were walking around in the forest. There's a big bear that jumps out in front of us. We need to run away, right? What do we need? We need energy. So we recruit energy from our glycogen stores. And that, is obviously elevating the blood sugar in the bloodstream. Great. What happens after that? Well, we all know that insulin is pumped out to regulate blood sugar, and then we may have a crash situation where we need energy after being a lot stressed. What do people do? They fill them up with energy. They drink more coffee, they eat more sugary things just to get their energy levels back up. So there's this symphony between the physiology of stress and the mental side of stress. Because as we go through this wheel, this circular event of cortisol production, blood sugar rise, insulin rise, cravings, which in essence could make you hangry or could make you tired. You're more prone to be stressed again. So cortisol goes up again, and then this whole cycle goes around and around and around. And really, it's only when you intervene, and a lot of people do that naturally. They intervene with their mindset. They go in and they control the stress levels by saying, "Oh, it's not that bad. It's okay. The bear was a friendly bear. I didn't need to run so fast," or whatever, right? So they downregulate the response in the system with their thinking patterns. And that's a really, really, really interesting phenomenon that has been studied a lot. Like the response that happens in your body, you can alter with your thoughts. Obviously, that sounds simple and complex at the same time. But there's a lot of interesting work by Dr. Eliza Apple, if you've heard about her. It's really, really interesting how the way we react to stress. Like, do we have a challenge mindset or do we have a fear mindset? Do we think of this situation? Do we look at the bear and go, "Oh, I can tackle that. That's not a problem. I've done that before." That's a challenge mindset. You go about it by saying, "I can do this," versus, "Oh shit, I'm scared." Like that sends all the wrong signals, activates all the pro-inflammatory genes. It creates more, it creates shorter telomeres, right? So you age faster when you're stressed like that. And you're creating more inflammation in your body. Just within an hour, you're creating more inflammation in your body if you're thinking about the situation with a stress response rather than a challenge response.
Yes.
That was a long mouthful, but there's a little bit about what happens in the body. I can go on, but that's the biochemically, side of the equation. But then there's HRV, the nervous system branches, the autonomous nervous system, sympathetic, parasympathetic, and all of that. So
I definitely want to go into HRV and the nervous system at this point, though, because you've given us so much gold with this mindset. I want to explore this a little bit further because this is a theme I'm really passionate about. And when you mention the importance of what you tell yourself and how they can actually lower your overall chronic stress load, my biggest realization with the self-talk and reframing was actually coming from the sporting world and working with athletes, and also putting myself in situation where I was preparing for races or doing peak performance or endurance sport, and realize it's the story you tell yourself and how you talk to yourself that is going to make the difference. That makes a difference to your stress level, to your performance. And I know that you've worked really closely with athletes yourself. So I would be really interested at this point if we could bridge that connection between the busy business executive mindset and the elite sport athletes. What can we learn from the sporting world, and where do you see that connection?
Well, it's interesting because you're right. I work with both, and I wish I was working more with athletes because they're phenomenal human beings that are like me, chasing the 1% sometimes, right, or even the 0.1%. They are not me, but like athletes, I'm super grateful that I've been able to work and do work with some of the world's best cyclists, like literally some of the world's best cyclists, and I've been doing so for 4 years, and it's been an interesting journey. I've also worked quite a lot with some of the world's best badminton players. Badminton is a sport. I think in the UK it's known, right? In the US, nobody knows what that is. But anyway, I happen to know another Danish person who's really famous in that world, and he now coaches young badminton players in his own academy. And we talked a lot about like stress in that environment. So when it comes to athletes and stress, what I've found is that it's what they lack, the mental tools. It's the coping strategies of calming their nervous system constantly so that they can perform at their max, right? And the executives is kind of like the opposite, because they don't have the big engine to drive them physiologically, but they have strong mental capacity, right? So they are good at dealing with stress from that perspective, but they're really bad at taking care of themselves. So they're overburdening their system constantly by, there's almost, I always make fun of it when I give talks about this, that, the typical executive want to be the Tour de France rider because that's just fancy, right? And they have a bike that costs them, more than my car, right? And they do all these things to be the best in what they do, but they don't take care of their engine, right? They do not understand that you can't go ride, 400 kilometers a week on your bike and have a top executive job and have a wife, have kids, drink 2 or 3 nights per week, and all those things just stacks up, right? So they are physically overloaded. The athletes are mentally overloaded by competition, by being away from their family, by yeah, I mean, those two are big items, right? But just like the uncertainty sometimes of, oh, what happens next, and I wonder about how that route is going to be, and this guy crashed the last time he was there, and like all these mental patterns. It's a lot of things there that athletes need to work with when it comes to stress. And then we're talking about teaching them how to use breath work, right? Use your breath to control the situation. Have a steady routine, like whether you're a badminton player or a Tour de France rider. You're traveling a lot. You're constantly changing your environment. It's very stressful for the body to change the environment. Different lighting settings, different air quality, different foods, and so teaching them how to control as many of these variables as possible. That's what I do with them. With the executives, as I said, it's more about just getting to understand that they're doing too much. They're overdoing everything, and that's what ends up killing them. So maybe over exaggerating there, but you know what I mean. So
Well, it often does. I know that's a bleak topic, but if we're being really honest, it happens,
oh yeah,
Right. Many of my clients have faced very severe diagnosis and been put in situation where life is actually at stake.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. You're right. It does happen, and I think it's unfortunate that that is still so taboo belated, this whole point about stress, because I'm absolutely sure that whether it's from high blood pressure that you end up having a stroke, or whether it's a blood clot forming because of stress in your system. And I loved your podcast interview with Stephen, by the way, the heart guy. It's amazing. It's really, really, actually, I was thinking of sharing that out there, because he's so good at like explaining the whole situation around cholesterol and the heart. And that's another story. But yeah, so many executives, they don't get it. They don't get that they are chronically inflamed. And like, inflammation is another topic we can talk for days about, right? Like, you go to the doctor and they take your CRP, which is one marker of inflammation, but there are many markers of inflammation that we ought to look for, like homocysteine and fibrogen and so on. Like, way more important markers if you want to understand what's your heart health, right? Forget cholesterol, forget CRP. Those are like benign.
So, Martin, at this point, I'm wondering if I could step into the shoes of one of our listeners and have a live consultation with you to understand what is going through my life right now. Is this good stress? Is this stress? Or am I overloaded with chronic stress? Is there
Mhm.
something wrong with the picture? Can we have this role playing?
We can try. Yeah. Let's
Yes,
give it a
let's
go.
do it. Let's do it. So I'm a very busy business executive. I work in Los Angeles. My name is Jay. I'm very successful, very accomplished, over 25 years of business success under my belt. Have a family, don't see them very often. I'm constantly traveling because I manage a global team. So travel to Asia, travel to Europe, back and forth to the US, South Africa, spend most of my life in lounges. My typical relaxation strategies at night are drinking, the occasional cigars with my clients for entertaining purposes. I work out, but only very vigorously and only late at night, because that's the only time I can fit it in once all my work is over. At this point, it's in a dark gym with a lot of AC. And then I have a late dinner. I sometimes skip it. I wake up at different times every day because I have to accommodate for my team's time zones. I'm super stressed, but I don't know any other ways. Don't really see my family much. And at the moment, I struggle with sleep, weight management, and overall happiness. I'm just really grumpy. I'm not
Mhm.
particularly happy.
Mm.
Martin, where I'm at. What can I do?
Wow. Well, Jay, that sounds like, first of all, you're not alone. Secondly, why did you come to me?
Because it feels like I can't continue like that. And
Mhm.
also, my wife said that if I didn't change something, she might be gone.
Wow. Well, you're not alone on that one either. So, wow. So let me start by asking, what are you doing today with regards to understanding your health? I get you. What you're explaining to me here is a lot we can dive into, but I just need to understand a little bit about. Have you done any specific tests or anything in regards to understanding how your body is operating at the moment?
The only thing I measure is my KPIs, success, and business metrics. I'm very good at those. Everything else, not so much.
Well, imagine if you could be as good as you are with your KPIs at work to understand, what your body KPIs are, and then try and steer through your well-being using KPIs, because that's what we can teach you. It's really giving you data on that, and I think that's what we should start and understand. Like, for instance, What does your nervous system look like? Because I bet you with the schedule you're describing here, you have a pretty low HRV, most likely. But I'm not going to put money on that. But if you have that data, that would be interesting to see. If not, let's get you hooked up with the device so you can we can track that.
I like data. I like tracking, Martin. So that's
Perfect.
that's music to my ears. Tell me more. I'm a numbers guy.
So what you can do with a simple device like a Whoop band or an Aura strap, Aura ring, other devices would work too, but those are kind of the favorite ones that we use. Is you can understand like the biometric signals on your daily habits, so you can see quite clearly. What does it do to you to go to a meeting? What does it do to you to go to the gym? What does it do to you to have a poor night's sleep? And understanding that, like, it's going to take some months, but trust me, once you get that understanding of what moves the dial in your nervous system, what situations, what people, what environments makes you happy, then you can start to engineer your life and be strategic about like engineering situations where you get more of the good stuff that does good for your body versus things that stress you out. And I bet you once you're through this program for the next 2 months, you'll come to realize that there may be certain individuals that are stressing you out. You may realize that your boss is one of those people. You may also realize that your wife is actually calming your nervous system, so you should go spend more time with her because that's good, right? And it's like I can give you that data, but it requires that you'll be a little bit diligent with collecting it. The ring or the wristband or whatever you end up using, it will help you quite a bit, but you will need to feed it with your habits. That's a good place to start. It's very, very simple place to start. We can go in the deep end on measuring you, many ways, but I think we should start there because for you to understand actually how your body is responding to the situation is a good starting point. Because I can tell you right now, you're not in an optimal state.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Martin, do you think that the fact that I'm not in an optimal state is the reason why my reactions are a little bit different? I'm confessing that I'm just angrier than I used to be. My patience seems to run really low at the moment. I snap at my team at times
Mm,
where I'm not showing my best leadership side. I've noticed getting quite reactive and annoyed and frustrated and aggravated at things that I would have 10 years ago handled differently. But
yeah.
I'm really pissed off overall, for lack of a better word.
Have you noticed if there's any correlation between you feeling that way and the night before? What happened there and the sleep that you had that night? Is that something you've noticed, or
Oh,
how was sleep last night?
my sleep looks like me staring at the wall, rehearsing all the things that I could have done differently
Mm,
and thinking about whether I sent all the emails that I needed to send to each member of my team and how many more clients I needed to contact in the morning. So a good part of my time spent in bed is spent in my head thinking about all the work that I could be continuing to do instead of sleeping.
mm. Well, we can definitely help you with that. I mean, definitely understanding. Well, two things. One is the physiological side of that. There's a lot you can do to help your mind in that situation, like things like giving you adequate magnesium, right? Give you some supplements to take for the night and for the morning, like making sure that you have enough kind of anti-inflammatory compounds in your body to deal with the fact that you're probably chronically your lack of sleep. You have a lack of sleep, and lack of sleep is going to create exactly the situation you described, where you're short tempered. Your ability to recall things is hampered. Your ability to just feel on top of things, it's going to be a struggle for you. You're using an enormous amount of energy to cope throughout the day if you haven't got your at least 7.5. I would love to see 8 hours of sleep, and it doesn't sound like you're getting that if you're lying awake most of the night. So definitely an area we could work on. Definitely something that's I would consider a low-hanging fruit. But obviously, there's also a mental side of this, right? We need to get you docked in with one of our mental coaches and understand, like, what is your coping strategy in that situation? How do you let go of those thoughts? And there are some techniques, like simple ones, like, write a journal, or, write a to-do list before you go to bed. Just offload your mind before you go to bed. It's a very simple strategy that is often neglected, because you're not alone. A lot of people are like you, but imagine if you had the tricks that could actually, make you thrive and continue to do what you love, while also being there for your family, while also feeling like you have a surplus of energy. And it's not impossible. So
I need more tricks, for sure. The other thing I was wondering, Martin, is the reason I contacted you is because I heard about the work that you do with Tour de France cyclists, and I'm a Tour de France fan. I watch it and I love it. And I often wonder, how do these guys do that and continue to perform at the level that they do? And I know this is so different to my world, but they travel too, and I travel. They have to compete, and in many ways, what I do is very competitive. They have to be the best at their game, and in many ways, I have to be the best at my game. So, although I know I'm not a professional cyclist, I do see a lot of me in them and a lot of traits that I want to have in my life. And I do look at them wondering, how can I be more like a champion Tour de France cyclist? Can you help me with that, Martin?
absolutely. I mean, for starters, at your level in your profession, you're right. In many ways, you are like them. But the one point where you fall short is recovery. The secret to maximum performance as an athlete is recovery. They spend as much time recovering as they do training. And they spend an awful amount of training time that is not race training, but more like just building up their base volume of stamina as their aerobic capacity, basically, right? And then that's often, again, neglected. Your in your profession, and believe me, I know that, you're trying to shortcut things, you're trying to get there faster. There's no such thing in an athlete's world. It requires years of really diligent training and recovery. And that's really what you need to take away from, wanting to be like them. Is like, they schedule recovery in their diary every day. They travel a lot, yes, but they have rest days planned so that when they travel long distance, they know they need to recover. They do not lie with their phones all night. When they go to bed, they go to bed, and they go to bed to recover and sleep and be ready for the next day. They have a bit of a warrior mindset when it comes to that, right? Your mindset is easy. It could easily become like that, but it requires you to let go and be really focused on what matters most to you. That's why I started my session here with asking, why did you come to me? Why does it matter? Because we need to understand, you need to find a hook to put your plan on here and say, this is why I'm going towards this. You need to come back to that. If you're a pro athlete who wants to, win the world championship in badminton, or, the world cyclings, whatever, that's what they do. They have a single goal in mind. And that's why they put down their phone at night and don't watch it, watch YouTube, whatever they do to fall asleep. At least many of them don't. So yeah, that's really the key. Recovery equals, in your situation, sleep, and let go of work. Let your mind be quiet so you have a surplus of mental energy to cope with the day every day.
I don't have any recovery strategies, Martin. I don't. And one of the biggest problem and conflict in my life at the moment is on the rare occasions when I am with my wife and children, I am on my phone working.
Many people are, yeah. But you gotta ask yourself, what's so important on that phone that's more important than your family, that you've just been away from for 7-8 days or whatever.
Mhm. Well, if I'm being completely honest, I'm more anxious when I'm not on my phone than when I am on my phone. Because when I'm on my phone doing my emails with my team, I have a sense of control. When I'm not on my phone, I don't know what's going on in the company, and that actually stresses me out a whole lot more.
Well, there's a lot we can talk about in that direction. I'll give you an anecdote. When I was working like you in a big company, when I was up for promotion, or actually I wasn't up for promotion, but I wanted to be promoted. I wanted to get that step up the ladder, and I was really trying to impress everybody around me. I was working long nights. I was doing a whole lot of things, and I was obviously, I guess, to my superiors, I was doing good things, but I was also not relaxed about it. I was like you were describing to me, a little bit tips, like antsy, what do you call it? Like you were a little bit like you know, agitated from time to time, almost too much. You're a little bit like bullish sometimes.
Mm.
And when I realized that I needed to let go and just be calm and focus on my energy rather than on my, my career goals, it only took about a year. And that sounds like a lot, but imagine like you're in this field of everybody competing for, for a director position. You got a lot of people around you who you're all competing with, right? And you're the one person who stands out with a surplus of energy. You're the one person who can rock the whole day in a meeting room without getting tired, without getting hangry, without, snapping at you on your team. That's what makes you promoted. That's what makes you really thrive. And it makes you happy when you get home as well, because you had a great day. Because the energy you expose into a room is the energy you get back. So if your team feels that you're agitated and you're snapping at them, well, they'll give you back the same energy. And you come home after a week's business trip with all that bad energy in your family, and your wife will get it too, and she'll send that energy back. And what do? Your coping strategy is the phone. Think of that for a second and try and flip it to a positive scenario where you come back with a surplus of energy because you've collected all that energy from your team. It's not impossible, but it requires a mindset change, and it requires you to recover as much as you train.
Yes, you've convinced me, Martin. I'm in. I am. Thank you for that. Very enlightening. I want to explore some of those coping strategies with you, stepping away from the role playing here and just thinking about how our audience could maybe benefit from some everyday holistic lifestyle strategies. And perhaps you could also tell us a little bit more about how you changed your life, Martin. And I know you definitely work a lot and accomplish extraordinary results in your business. And I've been grateful to see those results throughout the years of knowing you professionally. So I know you definitely accomplish a lot, but you also have much better health now than you did before. How did you do that?
Great question. And I think there's no one answer I can give you because it's a whole range of little things. There are some non negotiables, though, and that is strength training for me. And this sounds like a coping strategy. Well, how can that be a coping strategy? Well, it is because building grit through doing unpleasant things is, like we started with this talk about, evolution and how we meet the bear and all of that, right? It's like you build stamina as you do painful things. And I've decided about 3 years ago when I quit my corporate job and started our company, that I kind of knew I wasn't at my best stage, but I needed to be more healthy. I needed to be more resilient to cope with the very busy life of an entrepreneur. So I decided I'm going to train once a week, just once a week. And I joined a team with a professional coach who are really pushing us. And a lot of people, again, going back to the executives who are overdoing it, overtraining. I came from a background where I said I used to run quite a bit. Every day, regardless of how I felt, I was out running. And it was too much because I was already stressed. My nervous system was already shot. So I was like, just adding that, it gave me a little bit of energy. There's a little bit of endorphin going on, and it was all great. But at the end of the day, I was just, already at the top. But one time a week, really hard lifting weights, CrossFit, whatever it is we end up doing that day, has really changed a lot for me. It's really, really changed a lot because you're building more neurons in your brain, you're building more stamina, you may be stressed like in the moment, but believe me, you're building up stamina in your system. So that's one thing. Get some strength training into your routine. And you don't need 3 times a week. 1 time a week is enough if you do it right. That's the first thing I would say. The other coping strategy, and we've been around this before, is letting go. Like letting go. It's a continuous exercise that you need to, either through meditation or through some kind of mindfulness experience, where you just kind of, I've become really good at isolating thoughts that are bad for me and letting them go. Like this classic picture of what's inside your control circle, what's outside your control circle. It's very simple things, but a lot of people don't do it, right? But understanding what can you really do to change this problem here, and just isolate that and say, well, that's what I'm already doing, so that's good. And all the rest that I can't do anything about, I have to trust that what I can do and what I am doing will eventually change all the surrounding things that I can at the moment impact with what I'm doing, right? And letting go of trying to control every single aspect of a given scenario again and again and again and again and again. And that's what, again, meditation, wonderful practice to do that. It doesn't need to take a long time. You can do a walking meditation. You can sit down if you like, but, just, again, quieting your mind. And sometimes I call it thinkitation, right? Rather than meditation, because meditation can also be just quieting your mind. And then what naturally will happen is thoughts are going to come into your head. And those thoughts are exactly what I described before: fears and worries and concerns. And letting them go is part of the practice, right? So,
do you have any personal preferences around what kind of meditation or what kind of support you use or when you do it?
well, we haven't talked a lot about breath work, but what I normally do is I combine a technique that I taught myself, many years ago when I discovered this was this heart rate coherence breathing technique.
Oh, yes.
It's very, very impactful. And again, I delved into that back then because I could get a device where I could see exactly, the response in my nervous system as I was breathing this correct way, right? So it's about putting a smile on your face, like let your shoulders fall down and breathe into your belly and think of your heart. And when you do those 3 things, like breathe deep down in your diaphragm, put a smile on your face, and think of your heart, you will naturally get into what's called heart rate coherence, which is it's an algorithm on top of heart rate variability. That's a story for another day. But like it's a sign of your imbalance in your nervous system, basically. Doing that while I'm meditating makes it so easy. And I usually I sit down when I do it. So
Why don't we do it together?
we could.
Take us through it.
Oh well. Oh well, I'm not the guy who's teaching others other than one-to-one clients. We could try, but basically, it's about you need to sit down, which I'm not at the moment, and
I'll
you
do
need
it. I'll do it.
and you'll do it. But what you need to do, Charlene, is basically just you can close your eyes if you like, but I want you to, if you've done yoga, you know what I mean when I say deep breaths right down into your diaphragm, and really see your belly button going out and in and out and in, and slow your breath down as much as you can. And then see if you can find that rhythm between listening to your heartbeats. Imagine your heart. You can look at your heart in your mind and just think of that heart and how it pumps, and see if you can find a rhythm between your breath and your heart. And then put a smile on your face. And just keep that smile there. You've probably heard the studies about artificially prompting a smile will change our biochemistry. That's what's happening right now. So if you do that for just a couple of minutes, you'll get into what's called heart rate coherence. And when you're there, you will feel your whole body vibrating to the rhythm of your heart. I'll give you a few minutes to see if you can reach that spot.
Feels very good. Thank you, Martin.
Recommend getting hold of a heart inner balance center from HeartMath. It's a really good little cheap device connected to your phone that will teach you exactly this.
So that's a device that you use to support this coherent breath work?
Yeah, usually when I do workshops for companies about stress management, and I usually take a volunteer from the audience and I put them on stage and I teach them this technique while wearing this little ear clip that will measure this, and everybody else is looking at the screen. It's actually really, really interesting to see how even in a stressful scenario you can calm a person's nervous system down with this technique, and you'll see it instantly in the data. It's really,
How
really
quickly can you calm a person down with the data?
within minutes.
Minutes.
Yeah. Like usually within 1 or 2 minutes, people will get the rhythm of this technique, and you'll see the response in the nervous system. And they go home changed forever because you remember that feeling of, oh, I'm so relaxed now and everything is just bliss. And obviously you're looking at your device so you can see now it turns green, right? And then you get that clue. Again, your data can help us building these mental clues and build new patterns in our thoughts that we'll remember. So
I have a question for you. Considering you measure so many things with data and you very much are an expert at data trackings and devices, which I'm a huge fan of, and I think they give us that tangibility, right? So for anyone skeptical or on the fence, it's data. You can't deny it. They're hard facts. And I
yeah.
love that side of thing. But there is a flip side to it. And that's really where I want your take. How do you then manage the potential data device addiction loop and the over reliance or potential toxic dependency that you build with all these toys and gadgets, which I do see sometimes in the biohacking world, and in my opinion, can be the dark side of biohacking if not managed correctly.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Oh, I love that question, and I often get it. And I will say my response to that is always, I'm not afraid of teaching people to find their boundaries. Meaning, when I do these one-on-one sessions with people, or when I talk about this, it's a point that, like you just asked the question, always comes up. I am of the opinion that most people, if they go on this journey using data, let's say 1/3 will within a couple of months say, well, it's not for me. It stressed me out. And if they don't have a coach to help them, they'll put the device away and they will have wasted some money and hopefully have learned something. That's fine. That's one category. The other category is some people like me just need to visit some extremes before I know where's my boundary. Where do I take a step back? And to your point about a lot of people in the biohacking community, I've done probably like 60 meetups in my community here in Copenhagen and over the last, I don't know, 5 years. And I always mention this because there's a lot of especially young people who are so eager to be the best, who are so eager to perform and so eager to achieve that they just want to do everything at once. And I go, the most important thing to take away from this lesson this person just going to give you is N=1. You need to find your own boundary in this. And the true measurement of success is a calm nervous system. And you're not in a position of a calm nervous system if you're doing things too much. And you might even generate stress just by looking at that Aura app, looking at your sleep. So it requires some coaching if you're not mentally fit to do it yourself. But it's certainly a point where, again, when we work with groups of individuals, executives, and so on, we have them, right? We have their back in understanding this. And we talk about this, when people say, oh, I'm so stressed, I wake up and I look at the app and it says I didn't sleep well. And we go, well, how do you feel? And we teach people to always check in with themselves before they look at the data. Some people we say, well, don't look at data until you go to bed. Like, don't watch it in the morning, because the energy you decide to bring to the day is the energy that will carry you through the day, right? So it is, again, it's about the mental aspect of using this data. And it's in a very individual topic.
And how important do you think it is to talk about digital detox in the context of stress management?
Very important. It's also something that I teach people is like, just use the settings on your phone. We blame these devices for a lot of things, but if you use the settings that, for instance, Apple have introduced years ago, you can actually have a pretty relaxed relationship to your phone. Like my phone will automatically, remove all notifications between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. Right. So after 7 p.m., only my wife's notifications will get through to me. Anybody else, nothing. And that, when I change that, it significantly lowers your stress level. Immediately, it feels like you're anxious because, oh, nobody's writing me. I don't get any notifications. But I'm like, I don't care. Unless they're my best friends, I can answer them tomorrow or the day after. Like this society we've created where we have to respond immediately to everything. I hate it. It's not very good for our nervous system, right? But we've somehow defined that that's the norm, and I'm actively trying to teach my surroundings that that's not the case. And the phone can also help you sleep better, right? It can lower the brightness of the screen. You can even enable this disability mode where it turns off all the white and the blue colors, so it's a red screen, right? So my screen, it'll go red like this, right? Automatically at 8 p.m. So I have less exposure to, and I don't want to look at Instagram when it's all red, right? So that's simple little things that you can control. So
Yes, absolutely. And how do you handle your working at a screen, sitting down versus spending time outdoors? How important is that aspect to stress management?
huge, huge. Like again, it over time, people will come to realize they need this. But when you start working with people, if you tell them to go barefoot in their garden, they may not start there, right? But it's a slow moving train sometimes. But a lot of people will, once you convince them to connect to nature, they'll realize the calming effect that it's got. So I'm certainly not afraid of teaching my client to go barefoot in the garden and absorb some negative ions and all of that. But it's so crucial for, like, talking about technology and exposure to non-native EMFs and all of that. Like it's the one antidote, right? It's getting out in nature. So
Yeah. I was smiling because that's what I was doing right before our call, and I didn't put my shoes back on because right before we started this recording, I
yeah,
was having my coffee in the little sunlight that we have. It's not much, but we do have a little bit this morning. It's a shy sun, and I had no shoes on, and I was just taking in the grounding and earthing and putting my feet on the ground, which I find does magic before
yeah.
recording because I can feel the difference, and I go into the studio
Mm.
feeling really calm and actually grounded, genuinely embodied.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's a simple hack. I used to do that when I traveled. Like every time when I landed someplace, I was going to ground myself first thing, and it really helped my jet lag. It really did. People look at me like I'm crazy when I say it, but I'm like, just try it. Don't have to believe me. Just try it for yourself, and then come back and report. Right. So
Do you have any other hacks around nature exposure or outdoors that our busy executives could implement?
well, train outdoors. Like I talked about the importance of strength training, right? Which there are many, many benefits of that I didn't go into, but talking about longevity, which is another story, right? But training outdoors is very natural to our body. Our body is not meant to train in artificial lighting like a gym. Like it's meant to train in the environment that is harsh from time to time, right? Whether it's too much sun or too much cold. I mean, every day of the year, not every day, but every week of the year, I train outside. I always train in shorts every single time. Like winter, minus 16 degrees, I'll train in shorts. I don't mind the cold. The cold is building stamina in me, and I don't get a cold like your mom used to tell you that you should put on more clothes if you want to avoid getting a cold. Yeah, I don't. My immune system is, just primed to react to the little stress of that cold is, right? So train outside is a good way to get more nature.
Yes.
Forget the gym. So
And I think what you pointed out to here is so important, and something I had to learn is combat comfortable feeling. Like
Oh
this
yeah.
notion that,
Mhm.
you spend your whole life, and I did that for many years as a lawyer. I was living in a AC flat, working in an AC office, and now even most public transport have AC, or you're in your taxi that you can control the temperature of remotely. And actually, then you reflect back on your day and you've been in the same comfortable
Yeah.
environment with the same comfortable temperature.
Mm.
Whereas now, like you say, I spent the summer in South Africa, in Cape Town, when it was actually rather cold, and we went for a hike. And just like you, I was wearing shorts, and very intentionally, because I wanted to feel the cold and I didn't want to shy away from it. And like you said, I didn't catch a cold. In fact, I haven't had a cold all winter, because I know that my immune system is incredibly bulletproof and incredibly strong. Tell us more about that.
Well, it's a you know I guess it's at least here in Denmark it's become a thing now. Winter bathing, for instance, or winter swimming. But the whole principle of exposing the body to cold or heat extremities, basically, like getting the getting extreme temperatures, hot or cold, on your body will produce certain enzymes like AMPK that's going to be upregulating genetics that's associated with basically a better stress response and obviously a longer, healthier life. That's a very short version of it, but exposing yourself to cold will prompt your immune system to react. And if you don't overdo it, anything can be overdone, obviously, but if you don't overdo it, it's like that, little dose will make it go stronger and not, kill it off. So if you think of the concept of hormesis, I don't know how much time we have, but if you go into Hans Selye, the famous a scientist who discovered that he was putting arsenic on his yeast cells. That is, he was increasing the dose of arsenic on the cells. They would die off. But if you just gave them a little bit of arsenic, they would actually grow stronger and grow bigger. And that's when his discovery of this that later became hormesis, right? That every organic cell has got this ability to grow stronger from a negative impulse somehow, right? And that's basically what's happened across many different factors in your body. So when you expose it to something extreme, it will grow stronger. Same thing with another thing of gluten intolerance. I know I'm jumping around here, but like if you're gluten intolerant, for instance, unless you're celiac, right, which is a very, very severe condition in my opinion. But if you're just on that scale of intolerance, exposing yourself to a little bit of gluten will help you because you will slowly train your immune system to deal with it, right? So that the one day that you're, eating out at a restaurant and you get some gluten, if you haven't trained your system to respond to it for years, you get a much worse reaction versus microdosing. It's almost like microdosing gluten can be a good thing if you're just intolerant, right?
Yeah.
And think of the same thing with cold and heat. That's very, very similar. So,
Absolutely. I microdose on cold and heat on a
yeah.
regular basis. I just actually got back from the Saharan desert in Algeria, which was incredible. And everybody out there was protecting themselves from the sun. To be fair, it was quite hot, and I actually went for a run, and it
Yeah.
wasn't a reckless decision. I obviously took all the measures that I needed to take in terms of hydration and making sure I was fully recovered and I had slept well and I
Mm.
had what I needed to make sure that I was doing it safely. But I actually felt so strong for it. And I knew that afterwards I would have this natural burst of energy that would carry me through the day and enable me to think faster and to
Mm.
be more present. And, everybody that thought that was a bit crazy actually looked at my energy level through the day thinking, well, I want some of that. I was like, well, run
Exactly.
with me tomorrow then.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, yes. I'm so glad that we've talked about that. And actually, that brings us back full circle to the very beginning, how we met. Since when we were in Finland together, we actually did a cold bathing together.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
there we go, full circle.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful experience. So I'll make sure that we add one of these photos to the podcast.
We owe a lot to the Finns, that's for sure.
Yes, definitely. Let me ask you, Martin, do you have the same sauna culture in the
It's coming.
Danish culture as you do?
It's growing fast these days. Yeah, no, we don't, but just in the last, well, I think since COVID and the lockdown, sauna was the one thing people started doing, and winter bathing as well, right? So it's blooming here. Like every harbor site's got at least 2 saunas, and every gym's got sauna, and like there's so many saunas being built around. A lot of people install them at home and so on. So yeah, it's coming. It's rapid culture change for sure.
Oh, good. I'm a big sauna fan, so that's good to hear.
Amazing.
Wonderful. Can I ask you, Martin, how would you like our audience to get into your world and connect with you?
Well, I'm on Instagram, so you can find me there. I'm not very active. Kind of happens in bursts, but I'm super busy building the company. So if you want to look up our company and the work we do, the company's name is Biowatch. So biowatch.me. And our main focus right now, apart from all the things we do with athletes, is building this new longevity program called FreeAge. So if you go on Instagram and you find freeage.biowatch.me, then you'll see what that's all about. It's a whole other story, but it's all about genetics and DNA tests and Horvath's clock and all of that. But that's a story for another day. So.
Wonderful. Well, sounds like we have to have another recording then. I'll make sure to add the business details on the show notes for our audience. Thank you so much, Martin.
Thank you.
Now that you've learned about the extraordinary power of breathwork to optimize your personal well-being and boost your professional performance, I have a gift for you. Download your breathwork ebook by following the show notes so that you can start your personal breathing journey guided by me.